Alright, AP Human Geography classes, our last video on why do LDCs face obstacles for development, and unfortunately, there's a lot. Let's get to it. Alright, there are two major obstacles. Well, first off, LDCs must develop more rapidly than MDCs to kind of catch up to their level of development. Alright, so LDCs must increase their per capita GDP and then use this money for other economic and social endeavors to progress and develop their society. But there are two major obstacles to this. One is a political issue when adopting policies to promote development, and the other one is an economic issue, finding funds to pay for development. Where do these countries go for funding? All right, let's first start with one approach to development. It's called the self-sufficiency approach. All right, and this is when countries spread investment equally across all sectors of business, from farms to manufacturing, all right, to other types of its economy to all regions. So this is a very gradual, a slow pace of development, and it was, that's the key word, the most popular approach to development. Now, what's nice about this approach is that income between city and countryside can keep pace with one another. So we don't have a poorer countryside versus a richer city income. And what's great also about this model, it helps reduce poverty more so than any other development model, which we're going to talk about in a second. This model promotes domestic businesses over international corporations, right? So for example, if the United States were to use this model, which we don't, it would basically say that all American products, right, promoting domestic products versus, let's say, something coming in from, oh, I don't know, France. All right, so there are three barriers within this model to help limit the import of goods and protect domestic goods. One is high tariffs, right? High taxes on importing goods. Another is creating a quota system to limit certain types of goods coming into the country, such as oil or even fish. All right. And last is requiring licenses for importers, which obviously they might not want to do because now they have to pay money to import their goods and import it into this specific country using this model. Now, it also restricts domestic businesses from exporting to other countries as well, right? Keep domestic goods in the same country. One big drawback, this model fosters high government control over the country and businesses. You need a very, very strict type of control in order for this to successfully develop, as funds need to be allocated across different regions and across different sectors, as well as controlling items coming into the country. All right, here are the problems. Well, it protects insufficient business. So customers, no matter what, are going to buy domestic products, right? We just said about that due to high government control. There's literally no incentive to develop better products or to increase technology to develop better products. Your customers will always be there. Second problem is there's a need for a large bureaucracy. In other words, there needs a complex administration to monitor all the different sectors of business as well as creating policies. And unfortunately, this promotes corruption and abuse, such as illegal importing or black market items, so on and so forth. All right, let's talk about the other developmental model, one that is used now more so today that many, many countries use. And it's the international trade approach to development, which focuses on a country's distinctive or unique economic assets. This could be a food product, could be a mineral resource, hey, could even be oil. A country under this model should concentrate on selling this scarce resource in order to make a profit. And therefore, by making this profit, will turn it into a more developed nation. Now, there's a gentleman by the name of W. Rostow in the 1950s that proposed a 5-stage model of development for international trade, which we will discuss in class. And do know, and I think I said it already, the international trade model is now more widely used than the self-sufficiency model. All right, so here are some examples of international trade reports, some successes, if you will. There are countries called the Four Asian Dragons or Tigers. This is South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. They were the first countries to use this approach, and they all focus on specializing in producing a handful of manufacturing goods, such as clothing and electronics. Now, these countries are ranked very highly on the HDI score, and this is the reason why, due to the international trade approach. There's also the Arabian Peninsula states that include Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates. And guess what? They all focus on one type of product, oil, to increase their overall GDP, right? Oil is gold right there. All right, here are some problems in the international trade. It's not perfect. All right, there's uneven resource distribution. So some products' prices do not increase and some actually decrease. So unfortunately, it might just depend on what your country has as far as resources are concerned. For example, Zambia's copper reserves have been unable to promote development because, well, copper is not in high demand versus oil. Also, LDCs are increasingly dependent on MDCs. So for example, what if a new product or trend comes to MDCs? Well, this might affect the original resource. For example, hybrid cars, right? Oil production, yes, it's still at an all-time high, but oil prices have decreased as of lately due to hybrid and electric cars. And last but not least, the market is declining. We learn in population that MDCs are either staying the same as far as population is concerned or decreasing. They're in that level 5 of negative increase. And so thus the market size is shrinking due to population. Now, what are some items that promote international trade? Well, one is the WTO, or World Trade Organization, which was established in 1995 in order to reduce barriers for international trade among countries. They still do two of the following items. They eliminate or reduce restrictions on goods through quotas and tariffs. So basically, they're increasing investment. They also enforce trade agreements and intellectual property among nations. And countries or individuals can actually bring charges to the WTO, not just a country. So accusations have also been created against the WTO for promoting large corporations over poorer countries. A second factor approach is FDI, or foreign direct investment. Now, these investments are made by foreign companies into an economy of another country. So major sources of FDI are transnational corporations, right? These are corporations that invest and operate in countries other than the one in which its headquarters are located. For example, Apple, its headquarters are located in California, yet many of its investments are targeted towards China. How do LDCs gather funds, right? How are they financed? Well, unfortunately, like I just said, they lack sufficient funds for development. So there are two major world lenders out there for LDCs, the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, or IMF for short. They both were created in 1944 to promote economic stability and development after World War II. Now, LDCs borrow money primarily for infrastructure use, such as hydroelectric dams, roads, and water supplies. Here's the reason why. New infrastructure will make conditions more favorable for domestic and foreign businesses. Foreign and domestic businesses are not going to go to a remote area within a country unless it has infrastructure to transport their items out of that area. All right, let's talk about the World Bank real quick. It actually includes two different organizations, the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, or IBRD for short, and the International Development Association, or IDA. Now, the IBRD provides loans for reforming public administration and legal institutions, developing and strengthening financial institutions, implementing transportation and social products. There's their infrastructure right there. And all this money is raised from sales or bonds from private investors. Since 1945, $400 billion have been invested into LDCs. Now, IDA provides loans for poorer countries that are too risky for IBRD programs. So they've loaned out a total of $150 billion since 1960, primarily in two areas, Asia and Africa. Now, this money is based on government contributions from around the world to help LDCs. Thus, it is less than, let's say, private investment. All right, let's talk briefly about the International Monetary Fund. Now, they provide loans to countries that are having trouble paying back other foreign loans. So they loan on loans, basically. So what do? Well, they help stabilize currency exchange. They help pay for imports if they're hurting for money, these LDCs, and they help rebuild international reserves of money for expansion. Now, funding is based relative on the size of the world economy. They don't want to give out a loan that they think they can't repay over an extended period of time. So many LDCs, specifically Africa, unfortunately have trouble paying back loans. When the World Bank and IMF have invested in areas of Africa, unfortunately, MDCs and transnational corporations are just not attracted to those areas due to insufficient infrastructure and funding. All right, last is there is a small variation to the international trade model called the fair trade model. And this means that products are made and traded to protect workers and small businesses and LDCs. They are not abused, let's say. And we'll talk about that in a second. Now, there's something called the Fair Trade Produce Standards. And these are farmers and LDCs that cooperate as a collective unit to obtain loans. It's much easier when there's 30 of you than one of you. Now, these fair trade products from these farmers are sold at a higher price, but they are often a higher quality. They actually work directly with producers and cut out the middleman for exchange, so the products are not that much more expensive than other products. There's also fair trade worker standards under this model, and this is basically that international trade has often been criticized for only a tiny percentage of money that is returned back to the workers who actually produce the goods, right? We hear about sweatshops and how workers are abused on a constant basis. So under this, the employers would have to pay fair wages, doesn't say minimum, says fair wages, permit unions, and comply with environmental and safety standards, which unfortunately many LDCs are not because, well, guess what? It's expensive and it drives up the cost of goods. All right, that's it. We're going to talk much more about these items in class. All right, see you then.